Tonight on Chronicle, an epidemic is gripping Pennsylvania.
It's never been this bad.
More people are using heroin than ever before. And the gateway to addiction can be found in homes and medicine cabinets, no matter where you live.
It doesn't discriminate.
This is anyone's child, anyone's brother, sister, best friend.
Now the fight to get the problem under control.
It's a horrible physical dependency.
Before it's too late.
You're headed toward death. You're headed toward prison.
Hello everyone, I'm Kim Lemon. Welcome to News 8's Chronicle, spotlighting the heroin epidemic. It is a complicated problem, and we have a team of reporters that have been looking at it from all sides. But we start tonight with a first-hand account of what heroin addiction is really like. This is Dave Highfill. He's 24 years old. He's a recovering heroin addict, and he is one of a new wave becoming addicted to the drug. Dave was one of the lucky ones. He overcame his addiction, but as you'll see, it nearly killed him. Matt Barcaro has his story.
Rock bottom is a terrifying place to land. But that's where Dave Highfill was living. A roach-infested apartment cluttered with dirty needles and other drug addicts dying to get high, or just slowly dying.
Every day I woke up, I was not happy that I had woken up. Every day that I woke up, I was upset that I was still alive.
That's as bad as it can get. But it didn't start out that way. Addiction rarely does. Dave was 13 years old when he smoked marijuana, the first drug he ever tried. And over time, the drug culture became part of his culture.
My guard kind of started to get lessened, right? I wasn't as uncomfortable taking and experimenting with other things.
During that time, he picked out one painkiller pill from his parents' medicine cabinet and swallowed it. He never forgot how it made him feel. And a few years later, he was feeling it over and over and over again.
I remember, like, in the beginning, like, friends telling me, like, Dave, you better, like, watch yourself. Like, this isn't something to mess around with. And I was like, yeah, you know, I got it under control. Like, it's no big deal.
But he kept popping pills, spending more than $100 a day on Oxycontin. It got too expensive for a teenager without a steady job. And that was the allure of heroin. Heroin was cheaper, easier to get, and offered the same high.
I didn't think I was ruining my life at the time. Like, I didn't know really what I was getting into.
Snorting heroin became an everyday habit, and before long, Dave was hooked, and he knew it.
I don't know, like, when you're living that lifestyle and, like, you realize that you can't make it through the day without it, it's very hard to be like, well, you know, I got control over this. I mean, I couldn't say that in my own mind. I realized I had no control, and I kind of just accepted my fate as I'm a junkie and kind of just lived my life out that way.
A year into heroin, Dave made another decision. He stopped snorting the drug and started injecting it. He was the last of his friends to make the switch.
But I knew, like, that first time I stuck that needle in my arm that, like, I was ruining, like, making the decision to ruin my entire life, and really just didn't have any desire to stop it or change it or do anything differently.
And that downward spiral of his life sped up from there.
When you're addicted, when you're caught in the grips of it, you know, like, there was no option in my head. You know, I was going to do whatever it took to get the next one.
His parents forced him into rehab several times. He went and tried to get clean, but says deep down he wasn't ready. Then one day, it started bothering him that his family didn't feel safe around him anymore. And that's all it took.
Like, I just had, like, this moment of clarity, like, it smacked me on the head. And I had called my mom, and I was just like, listen, like, I need help.
It was July 17th, 2012, the day Dave Highfill left heroin behind.
That's really just the beginning of Dave's story. We'll be following his journey throughout the hour, and you'll see just how hard it is to break a heroin addiction, but that it is possible with help. Kim?
Thank you, Matt. So the question you may be asking, how many more people like Dave are there? Is heroin addiction really an epidemic? Here are the facts. In 2011, 4.2 million Americans ages 12 and up reported using heroin in their lifetime. And the problem is especially bad in Pennsylvania, which has an average of 40,000 heroin users. That's the third most nationwide. You can see the trend here. The number of people using heroin each year in the U.S. nearly doubled between 2007 and 2012. And since 2012, the problem has only gotten worse. We've talked to police, we've talked to coroners and elected officials throughout the Susquehanna Valley. Everyone agrees the problem is the worst it has ever been right now. So how did we get here? Heroin has been a popular drug for decades, but in recent years, people have been getting a taste for the drug without even knowing it.
Because of the quadrupling of prescribing, many people became addicted to prescription opioids.
Secretary Gary Tennis is the head of drug and alcohol programs here in Pennsylvania. He says over the past decade, there was a move in the medical field to eliminate all pain by prescribing painkillers. Many became addicted.
They were dead wrong, and even the people that pushed that point of view have acknowledged that it was a big mistake.
The problem? Painkillers and heroin are both opiates, so they have similar effects. According to the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office, people who abuse painkillers are 19 times more likely to use heroin.
After a while, you can't afford the prescription drugs anymore, or you can't get them. And then these individuals being addicted then go to the street for heroin.
The other factor fueling this fire? Heroin is significantly cheaper than prescription painkillers. On average, you can buy 5 doses of heroin for every 1 painkiller pill. As the use of prescription painkillers is growing, so is heroin in places it has never been seen before. 8 on Your Side government reporter Pete Muntean gives us a closer look by taking us undercover.
This is what an addict sounds like.
You just have to know the people that sell it.
And over the past 10 years, Lisa says getting her fix only got easier.
There's a lot of different places where it's really easy to get it. So we're kind of like right in the middle of all that traffic.
All it takes is a short drive through York County, and you will find heroin.
I think there's a lot of people who believe that heroin is just a York City, Harrisburg City, Lancaster City, Reading problem. It's not out here in Wrightsville. It's not up here in Dover.
Sergeant Craig Fenstermacher is undercover with the York County Drug Task Force. He can't show us his face, but can show us where his detectives are making buzz.
It goes right down here.
Just last month, they tracked a man trafficking heroin from Philadelphia to Hellam, population 2,600.
Lived with his mother down here, and this is where he operated. He drove, like I said, drove to Reading a couple times a week, and when we arrested him, he had close to $80,000 in his mother's basement.
Detectives call heroin traffickers operating out of small towns sleepers, taking advantage of a place with a small police force.
Their whole purpose in life is to get more heroin.
David Sunday prosecutes York County's drug cases. He says the spread to suburbia is not surprising.
We have seen a tremendous influx of heroin, and the heroin that has come into the county is at some of the lowest prices that our detectives and police officers have seen.
And here, that influx means a spike in fatal heroin overdoses. County Coroner Pam Gay says the first 2 months of this year have been the deadliest on record.
It never totally prepares you till I actually started tracking the numbers and the areas that this was coming from.
And detectives just made another big bust in Dover.
Quiet suburban neighborhood.
The dealer lived here and was allegedly selling in York City. Police caught him with nearly 1,000 bags of heroin.
What does that say about how bad this problem is in York County and in the state?
The message is that heroin is everywhere. It is in every community, in every school district.
People are definitely naive. It's just a matter of finding it or knowing about it.
Our thanks to you, Pete. And now we've told you how bad the problem is. So what is being done to fight it?
But it's a downright war right now.
From the state going after drug kingpins.
Are you innocent?
To the crackdown on street-level dealers.
We need to react with all the tools that we have.
But some say one of those tools goes too far, reaching into your medicine cabinet.
They need to get a search warrant.
The pressure is on for law enforcement to get this problem under control right now. But they face an uphill battle.
It's never been this bad.
Coming up, the fight to get heroin out of our communities. Welcome back, everyone, to Chronicle. The state is cracking down on the heroin problem, publicizing big busts and arrests. Government reporter Pete Montine asked if it's working, and the state's top cop told him she could do more.
These are 10 grams of heroin.
It comes from Philadelphia, Baltimore, New York. But in this case, instead of ending up in the hands of users, it's in the evidence locker of State Attorney General Kathleen Kane.
This is a war. We need troops out there.
In February, Kane's agents swarmed what they say is Pennsylvania's heroin epicenter, Hazleton, just south of Wilkes-Barre. They got more than 35,000 packets of heroin and made more than 100 arrests. The youngest suspect, just 9 years old.
So in a way, while the problem has become much worse, I think we've become better or are becoming better in battling the problem.
Kane says her agents are forging new relationships with federal agencies, state and local police. State Police Commissioner Frank Noonan says heroin is so widespread, his troopers are maxed out. The Attorney General's office estimates the number of heroin users in the state is up to 40,000 and rising fast.
It's not just the committed addicts, it's also the people that are out on a weekend experimenting for drugs. Oh, let's try this. It's readily available. So it is a much more difficult problem because of the spread.
If this problem is growing, how much of an impact is law enforcement really having?
Now, the problem is not on the rise because law enforcement isn't doing their job. The problem is on the rise because of the supply and the demand. So we have to keep up with it.
State agents picked up this bag of heroin in Lancaster, but it came from Philadelphia. In fact, it was even wrapped in this Philadelphia Inquirer newspaper. Kane says that stresses that this is a statewide problem, and she needs more state agents.
We can combat it. We just need the resources to do it.
Kane is asking state lawmakers for an additional $6.3 million for the State Attorney General's office. She says that will help pay for 16 new drug agents.
This is going to save lives. There is no doubt that this is a great law enforcement tool that we desperately need in Pennsylvania.
She's also speaking as a mother who wants to protect her children and every other Pennsylvanian.
We serve them, and we can't put a price tag on their lives or the lives of their children.
And according to Kane and Governor Tom Corbett's proposed budget, the Attorney General's office would have funding for 50 fewer agents than it had in 2005. Well, now there's another tool that law enforcement officials want in the fight against heroin. It would allow them to find out which prescription drugs you've been buying. But some say the program goes too far, jeopardizing your privacy.
When you can stop the abuse of prescription drugs, you nip it in the bud right there.
Cumberland County District Attorney Dave Freed wants lawmakers to give police more access to a new statewide prescription drug database. It's designed to help pharmacists and doctors monitor drug abuse and fraud by patients.
The database will show us that this particular person, is getting an amount of drugs that no person could survive taking in a month's time.
But Andy Hoover of the ACLU wants to keep law enforcement out.
If prosecutors want to get into this database, they need to get a search warrant after finding a probable cause. That's the standard that's in both the federal Constitution and the state Constitution.
Freed says investigators would only access drug records when there is a reasonable suspicion something criminal may be going on.
We're pushing back against the tide, and this is one more tool that we need.
Ultimately, the future of this program rests in the hands of lawmakers. The House overwhelmingly voted for the bill last year. No word on when the Senate will vote. And when it comes to getting drugs off the street, police say it is a constant battle, but technology could be turning the tide. News 8's Barbara Barr looks at who is getting the upper hand.
You're looking at video taken by a coalition camera in Lancaster City. Police gave News 8 clips showing drug buys that are really part of sting operations. In this one, the man on the bicycle is a former undercover officer. The man walking in the sweatshirt, a drug dealer.
We realized, wow, the cameras are huge, very valuable.
Sergeant Kevin Fry heads up Lancaster's Selective Enforcement Unit, in charge of getting drug pushers and users off the streets.
Dangerous stuff.
When it comes to heroin, Fry says it's been a consistent problem since he joined the Drug Enforcement Detail 3 years ago. Its tentacles reaching into all parts of society.
I mean, all over the spectrum. We've seen anywhere from teenage kids, I'm talking 13, 14 years of age, using all the way up to people 50, 60 years of age.
And deals are going down across a wider area. It used to be there were certain sections of the city police knew were popular for drug deals, but technology has expanded the playing field.
Now with the use of cell phones, the deals can be set up and go down almost anywhere.
Even taking place in front of schools.
The time the deal is occurring in the open public, there's school children on their way home from school, walking through the area, and they're walking right by them.
But with more than 100 cameras across the city capturing clear images, investigators are using technology to their own advantage in obtaining evidence that will stand up in court.
One of the biggest things that defenses that we deal with is, from a defendant, is that wasn't me. But when you have video showing that indeed that was them, it's kind of hard to use that as a defense.
Police used these videos they shared with us to help win cases, sometimes without much resistance.
And one of the benefits of the video and having great evidence from those types of things is a lot of times these cases never even get to trial. There's usually a plea bargain beforehand.
Fry says the drug and heroin problem will never be completely eliminated, but law enforcement is trying to make a dent in it, one bust at a time.
And police say the judges are handing out stiffer sentences to help keep dealers off the streets longer. But ultimately, law enforcement can only do so much to fight this problem. Experts say you can't just lock people up. To battle addiction, you have to address it from its root.
It's a sickness of the soul.
Coming up next on Chronicle, turning the tide in this epidemic rests on whether addicts can get treatment.
We can cut our crime rates in half. We can cut our jails and our prison populations in half.
We look at programs having success and why not everyone has access to them.
Welcome back to Chronicle. We want to continue with Dave Heifel's story. We told you earlier about his struggle with heroin addiction, and now it's time for him to begin his recovery. And that starts with treatment.
The actual facility here, everything's pretty much. Once Dave Heifel made the decision to quit using heroin, he spent a lot of time in this room.
So how far are you in?
And a lot of time with Dr. Chris Davis, a counselor at New Insights Rehab Center in Lemoyne.
It just had gotten to a point where, like, I knew I was going to die or go to jail. Like, I knew those were the either two options if I continued living the way I was living.
Yet convincing himself to try rehab one more time was one of the most trying times of his treatment.
To make that initial step in that phone call of, like, I need help, I can't do this, was a real scary step to me. Because, you know, you're admitting that I have a problem with my life, right?
In this room at New Insights, Dave sat in on counseling sessions where he learned about the addiction that stole most of his early adult years and learned how to beat it.
Being normal is a challenge when you've spent so much of your time being a dope fiend.
All right, Dave, let's go back to my exam room.
He also received some medical treatment to lessen his physical dependency on heroin. But Dave says the counseling and the self-confidence to stick with it is what helped him most.
Like, I made that mental decision that, like, I didn't want to shoot dope anymore.
He lived for a year at the center's recovery house and cut out the friends, influences, and routines that could trigger his habit. And it worked.
And just knowing that, like, I wanted something more out of life and making that decision that I'm going to get it has completely changed my entire life.
And as with the case with Dave, treatment is the most direct way to combat the heroin epidemic. The problem, there just isn't enough money to treat every addict. According to the Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs, or the DDAP, there's only enough money to treat 1 in every 8 addicts in Pennsylvania. And today the need is greater than ever, with more and more young people falling to addiction. One successful program has had hundreds of young men walk through its doors over the past 40 years. Ann Shannon has more.
On the outside, Mono's house looks like a quiet, secluded retreat.
Those are important things.
But inside, there is serious work going on here.
We're a drug and alcohol rehab, and we specifically address the needs of adolescent males.
Teens, typically ranging from 14 to 19, are sent here through the court system. For many, this is the latest stop on a long road of abuse.
So no one is here by choice, and we are a long-term rehab, so the average length of the program is about 6 to 7 months.
Cassie Coder is the clinical supervisor. She oversees the program, which houses about 40 teens. More and more, the clients are getting younger.
I would say we have more 16, 17, 18-year-olds, but I actually worked with a 13-year-old once, And when we work with those younger kids, those 13 to 14-year-olds, a lot of times you find that there's a lot of problems in the home as well.
There's also an increasing number of clients with heroin abuse issues.
I think part of the problem is so many of them use prescription painkillers. You know, kids get into a medicine cabinet and they love any, Vicodin, Percocet, Oxycontin, and when they develop a habit with that, it's so easy for that to turn to heroin.
Thin piece of this mesh here.
While they're at Mono's house, the teens' mission is to gain the skills they need so they can be successful on the outside.
The great thing about the juvenile system is that we want to see kids get better.
This becomes their home away from home. They live in dorm-like housing. In the morning, the teens attend the center's state-approved high school, Prospect Grove.
So they transition to classes. Everyone has a schedule based on their needs. We've had kids stay so that they could finish their credits they need to get their high school diploma, anything that's going to really give them an edge to be successful. We want to keep them here until they can accomplish that, but not longer than they need to be here.
Afternoons are filled with group and individual therapy. The teens learn to work on expressing themselves in different, positive ways. There's also a focus on giving back and serving the community.
Addiction is very selfish. It's all about me and what I want, and we want them to see you can do something for somebody else and that it feels good.
It's also an important milestone in their road to recovery, a journey they'll be able to continue on once the counselors here believe they have the skills to make it on their own.
And once they leave Mono's house, the teens receive advice from counselors on how they should continue their treatment. But treatment is not just something that benefits addicts. Society as a whole gains when an addict enters into a treatment program. According to the DDAP, people are 70% less likely to commit a crime after going through treatment. And the recidivism rate, meaning someone returning to committing crimes, is only 16% for an addict post-treatment. But ultimately, an addict has to reach a point where the desire to get better outweighs the need for the drug. It's often called hitting bottom. Susan Shapiro introduces us to a man who was able to pick himself up after hitting his low point.
John Lefevre looks like any guy on the street, but he's carrying a lifelong burden as a heroin addict. The opiate had its grip on him on and off for 16 years. He's now 34.
There's so many days I could have ended up dead, or in the hospital, or, just, I don't know, it was just a horrible way to live.
John got addicted to heroin after first using prescription meds and other drugs. It was cheaper and easier to buy, but more of a risk.
My whole day revolved around, how I was going to get high.
Very quickly, addicts like John are using, not just to get high, but to prevent being what's sometimes known as dope sick.
At first it's like, okay, I can deal with this, and it takes about 3 or 4 days, and then when you don't have it, you start to get sick. You start to physically withdraw, and that's when it has a hold of you, because you'll do anything for it, anything.
To support his $300 a day habit, 2 or 3 bundles of the stuff, John turned to crime.
I was stealing everything. Breaking into construction sites, using people's business accounts. It's nothing I'm proud of, but it made me who I am today.
Who he is today is a recovering addict who's been through rehab and a halfway house program. He now has a job as an aide at this treatment facility in Ephrata.
The past 2.5 years of my life have been amazing, but it takes work. And not all of it's good.
John graduated from Lancaster County Drug Court in March. It's a boot camp alternative to prison that works on sanctions and incentives, the carrot and the stick.
It took me lots of trial and error to finally figure out that there was a life on the other side of the addiction.
Drug court is really rewarding when you see the people get their lives back together, get their families back, and get their kids back.
John is also a dad to 8-month-old Josie. A man who once wanted to die now has everything to live for.
John continues to go to 12-step recovery meetings regularly. He says his recovery will be a lifelong effort. Coming up on Chronicle.
We've seen people with a needle still in their arm. That's how quickly they die.
Heroin is already a deadly drug, but a powerful strain has been responsible for dozens of deaths in the state. We'll take you to the Susquehanna Valley city where the drug first hit. When it comes to tracking how drugs make it into the Susquehanna Valley, officials say it's no big secret.
We have a number of small airstrips that you can easily come in and out at any time of day. You don't have to file a flight plan. Pennsylvania also has a very intricate highway system. So a lot of the places that we're seeing as some of the supply houses for the drugs are right off of certain interstates.
We are smack dab in the middle of several major highways connecting us to cities like Philadelphia, Baltimore, even New York City, making the Susquehanna Valley an easy access point for drug traffickers. Well, welcome back, everyone, to Chronicle. This year, drug overdose became the leading cause of accidental death in the United States, passing car accidents. That's also true in Pennsylvania. But tracking just how deadly the heroin epidemic has become is no easy task. The state lumps all drug overdoses together, so you don't know how many cases are actually heroin related. So we reached out to county coroners in the Susquehanna Valley. All of them say they have seen a rise in heroin overdoses. For example, in York County, Coroner Pam Gay says she has already had 7 confirmed heroin deaths this year, and 9 more are likely pending drug testing. That's 16 likely deaths in just 3 months. York County had 19 heroin overdose deaths, all of them last year. And while heroin itself is deadly, a powerful strain laced with a potent drug has been sweeping through the state. As Barbara Barr tells us, the Susquehanna Valley was one of the first places in Pennsylvania to feel the impact.
It was a scene repeated over and over in Lebanon County last spring. Ambulances rushing heroin users to Good Samaritan Hospital for overdosing on something far more lethal. 1 person died. More than a half dozen others, all young men, had ingested heroin tainted with the powerful painkiller fentanyl.
We've seen people with a needle still in their arm. That's how quickly they die.
Dr. Mark Bonin heads up the emergency department at Good Samaritan Hospital. Users usually can't tell if the heroin is tainted until it's too late.
When a person obtains a drug like that, there's no way to know how potent it is.
When used legitimately, fentanyl is a pain reliever. The hospital keeps it and other potent drugs under lock and key in the pharmacy.
Fentanyl, potency-wise, is 100 times more powerful than morphine.
When the fentanyl scare hit, health and law enforcement agencies warned the public about the danger.
We still want to do what we can to protect everybody in our community, including those folks that do have a heroin addiction.
Following the public health warning, fentanyl-laced heroin overdoses subsided in Lebanon County, but the problem quickly spread. Neighboring Berks County reported 4 deaths, and early this year, 22 deaths were reported in western Pennsylvania. The laced heroin was found in bags labeled Theraflu and Bud Ice. The state has now confirmed overdoses in at least 15 counties.
Caught some of the dealers. You know, the unfortunate reality is oftentimes when you catch one dealer, they get replaced by another one in relatively short order.
Answering overdose calls is never easy.
And it leaves a really a mark on you. Okay, here we come.
In addition to his duties as coroner, Dr. Jeffrey Yoakum runs a family practice and serves as director of the Lebanon County Methadone Clinic that's treated some 400 opiate addicts since it opened 8 years ago.
Probably why partly I got into the drug and addiction field, have the ability to offer people help.
A lifeline that can mean the difference between life and death.
The State Department of Drug and Alcohol Program says fentanyl-laced heroin caused at least 50 deaths in a 6-month stretch last year. We still have a lot more to come on Chronicle. When we come back, a community that's banding together to keep drugs out.
You need to take a stance that we're not going to tolerate it, not here.
Turning the tide in this epidemic hinges on getting to kids before they get addicted.
Change the direction of a course of destruction to one of success.
Hear the one thing you can do right now to keep drugs from getting into the wrong hands. Then later,
this is anyone's child, anyone's brother, sister, or best friend.
The human toll of addiction and how it causes families to suffer, oftentimes in silence. Plus,
This is a lifesaver. This is proven to save lives.
many call it a miracle drug, able to stop an overdose in a matter of seconds. But many want to restrict who is able to get it. Find out why when Chronicle returns.
Dave Heifel broke free of his heroin addiction 632 days ago. That's almost 2 years of a new life.
The difference is the hope. Like, I didn't have any hope then. I have a lot of hope now. Wherever I'm going, it's better than where I was.
But to keep going forward in recovery, Dave has found that it helps to dig up his demons in the most honest way he can.
There's a reason to what I'm doing and why I'm doing it.
Thank you for coming this afternoon. This is an In My Own Words from the RAISE Project.
Dave found the support he needs among a group of former addicts, trying to hold on to that hope just like he is.
So, I'm going to have Dave share his story now. After his story's done, he's open to questions.
I just always remember kind of feeling a little less than when I was growing up and feeling like I didn't quite fit in.
As if reading from the diary of his darkest days, Dave retraces his steps to sobriety, the entire journey from the very beginning.
I forget the first time I touched opiates. I think I was maybe 16, and I found them in my mom's medicine cabinet.
He shares the same story with small school groups and in front of crowds of hundreds.
I dropped out of everything. I dropped out of life completely. I just became a full-blown heroin addict.
He told us, even now, opening up like this can be scary.
What I say is important, no doubt about it, but it's not so much that's not what helps me. You know, the fact that what I say might help somebody else is what helps me.
Part of Dave's recovery is helping others recover.
But I don't think it really depended on the treatment. It was more where I was mentally, right? At this point, once you get some clean time and some hope back in your life, one of the biggest things to keep that hope is that I have to share it with others.
And together, their recovery is becoming their reality.
Thanks. I appreciate you guys. For real.
Thank you.
RAISE Project, where Dave shared his story, is an advocacy organization for all addicts. We have a link to its website at WGAL.com. Now we have yet to talk about one key element to getting this whole problem under control. It's the need to prevent people from ever using drugs in the first place. Ann Shannon went to one Susquehanna Valley community where all hands are on deck to keep drugs out.
It's a busy day at Elizabethtown High School. Before classes even begin, a small group of students meets in a conference room.
Yeah, you guys and 50 of your closest friends.
The students are members of PAWS, a club that encourages classmates to make positive choices.
So grown up.
Minutes later, another group gets together, this one for young women who serve as role models to younger students.
It was really cool for me because I did clubophilia as a girl when I was in elementary school.
There are dozens of opportunities for students here to make good choices. Choices to stay away from drugs. Much of the work is done by Elizabethtown Communities That Care, or CTC. The nonprofit has a federal grant to help prevent drug use in the Elizabethtown area.
Now our goal is to engage everyone, every sector of the community, parents, youth. The faith community has really stepped up. Law enforcement, the school, we're all partners together.
It's like being a father to 1,200 students. I have such pride being in this building. It makes my job easy.
Principal Timothy Ray sees the difference the nonprofit is making. Discipline issues are down, positive choices are being celebrated. Junior Kayla Eck was honored by the group's Do the Right Thing initiative.
I was shocked. I was not expecting it, honestly. I usually try to do the right thing every single day and make other people happy, but I don't ever expect an award out of it.
It's critical. It takes a community to take on these types of problems.
Jack Menzer is Elizabethtown's chief of police. He knows law enforcement has an important stake in the fight against drugs.
Enforcement in and of itself is neither a solution nor a strategy. It's a multifaceted approach that takes prevention, that takes education, that takes post-addiction care, and enforcement.
Police have made major drug arrests, and they've also worked to get prescription drugs out of homes and off the streets by placing prescription drug drop-offs in each of the area's police stations.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not naive to think that we know everything that's going on in our community. But we have a very good network of information within our community, and we are very proactive in our enforcement.
Yes, there is some, and we're working on it.
Madeline Powers serves as a youth advisor. She lets town leaders know what's going on from her perspective. She even helped to start an after-school dance class to give classmates another positive option. The faith community here is doing their part, getting involved and supporting those who need it, while celebrating those who don't.
We know that about 2/3 of our students are making good and healthy decisions.
Those prescription drug drop-off boxes Ann mentioned, they are actually available all over the state. Officials say you should go through your medicine cabinet right now. If you have any prescription pills left over, dispose of them immediately. And we've set up a link at WGAL.com so you can find the closest one to where you live. Well, when we come back on Chronicle, you'll hear firsthand the impact addiction has on families.
And she wanted to do it again, and that's what she did. She did it until she died.
This woman knows all too well the pain of losing a loved one to overdose. Why she says we need to rethink our perception about who is using drugs. Then a drug that can prevent overdose deaths from even happening.
Truly, it's like a miracle.
Hear why it's controversial even though it has no negative side effects.
Welcome back, everyone, to Chronicle. The heroin epidemic is not just a problem for addicts and police. It's affecting countless families here in the Susquehanna Valley as many deal with addiction behind closed doors. But the Mechanicsburg woman you're about to meet wanted to share her family's story in hopes that no one else will suffer like hers did. Here again is Matt Barcaro.
I needed to be saved. I needed something to save me. And yoga absolutely was that tool. Rise up strong.
Nina Hamilton can see clearly now, and from the yoga studio she opened in Mechanicsburg, she found a new calm.
I started feeling again, I started feeling alive. I started feeling like I could start to heal from the loss of my brother and sister.
Nina's brother Philip lived life to the extreme in everything he did, but his hard-charging ways exposed him to many risks. He partied and experimented with drugs, and a month before his 26th birthday, one experiment of heroin and Xanax was his last.
All choices have consequences, and that's what his was.
Nina was the first one at the hospital that day.
I got there before the ambulance had arrived, and I saw him pull him out, and I could see his feet, and I could tell that they were blue. And in that moment, I knew that I wasn't going to see my brother again alive.
Nina spent weeks crying over her older brother's death and lived in a fog for nearly 2 years.
I was like kind of accepting, like, okay, I need to live my life and I need to start healing. And then my sister died. Just crazy when I say it.
Melissa Hamilton was the family's star student, captain of the cheerleading squad and in the orchestra. But she stumbled into the wrong crowd in college and dove headfirst into heroin.
And she overdosed the first time she did it. And when she came to, she wasn't like, oh my God, that was the scariest thing I've ever done. She wanted to do it again. And that's what she did. She did it until she died.
Melissa was instantly an addict, and it took over her life. Nina kept a questionnaire Melissa filled out during one stint in rehab, detailing the night she was pistol whipped and nearly raped while buying drugs.
I didn't go to the hospital because I was too worried about getting high. The next day, I went back to the same place to cop dope again. That's the life of an addict.
Melissa stayed over at Nina's house after one final try at rehab. The next morning, they found her dead in the bathroom. The heroin Melissa relapsed with was laced with fentanyl. She was 29. Shortly after her sister's death, Nina discovered yoga. It gave her the strength to be open about the effect heroin has had on her family. She knows too well the stigma.
Drug addicts are kids no one cares about, people with no lives. But that's not true. This is anyone's child, anyone's brother, sister, or best friend. Like, a whole community lost two amazing people because of drugs.
And now she's sharing their struggles, hoping to save lives and find peace in the process.
We honor all others. Together we say, Namaste, bowing to the light within you.
Nina made it a point to include a line about heroin in her sister's obituary. She wants parents to know that drugs can affect any family. You may be surprised to hear, though, that there is a drug which can literally stop an overdose cold, breathing life into someone who is on death's door. But there's a concern about making it available to everyone. Susan Shapiro has more.
Like many ambulance companies, South Central EMS has been called out on numerous heroin overdoses in recent months.
It comes in waves. We'll have a few, and then we won't have any at all. And then we'll have 4 or 5 in a 2-week span.
The heroin on the streets is more powerful than ever, and sometimes laced with substances like fentanyl. It can quickly cause an addict to go from bad to worse.
You never know with any type of call in this business what you're going to encounter.
South Central Chief of Operations Jason Campbell says they usually find an overdose patient unconscious.
If it affects them greatly and they go unconscious and they stop breathing, it's minutes before we have to be there.
And when they get there, they're armed with this medication, naloxone hydrochloride, also known as Narcan.
This is an IV medication that we give the patient IV, and it is definitely, yes, an injection. This purple end here comes off, and this yellow end here comes off. And actually, we'll sit in here, actually screws in, and then we can go ahead and give the medication.
Within minutes, patients come back to life.
The medication is very powerful, and is a medication that we are seeing that we're giving more and more often.
Narcan works very well, doesn't it?
Emergency room physician Michael Rehart says there are receptor binders in the body for all drugs, like a lock and key mechanism.
And what Narcan does, it helps displace that lock and key mechanism and allow the person to come back to life and to start breathing on their own.
But he and other medical professionals are concerned about putting the medicine in untrained hands. The FDA just approved a handheld auto-injector version of the prescription for use by family members and caregivers. The head of the Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs in Pennsylvania has been advocating for that.
Sometimes seconds matter. So if a family member has it, if mom or dad has it, and they come in and they discover their son or daughter overdosed, the 10 minutes that it takes for the ambulance crew to arrive might be a difference between life and death.
But Tennis admits naloxone is just a triage to prevent death. He says only education and expansion of treatment will stop the heroin epidemic.
Before we go to a break, we want to take a minute to tell you more about Chronicle. It represents News 8's commitment to covering big topics affecting the Susquehanna Valley. And we will continue to bring you specials like this one as those topics emerge. There's still more to come after the break, so stay with us. For the past hour, we've been taking an in-depth look at the heroin epidemic that's happening right now. We've also been following one person, Dave Heifel. He's been giving us a candid account on what life is like from addiction to recovery. We check in with Dave one last time as he celebrates sobriety.
I'm going to sit right here and you're going to sit right there.
Getting here was not easy.
Can you read this out loud to me?
But Dave Heifel has settled in nicely to life after addiction.
I enjoy my job. I fully enjoy working here.
Dave is a tutor at Harrisburg Area Community College. He's also a full-time honor student there with hopes of earning a diploma and a job as a teacher.
The meaning behind being able to give back, the meaning behind being able to have a dependable job and being a dependable employee are all, huge aspects of my recovery and like huge aspects of my life.
Dave says it's been a challenge to essentially start over at 24 years old, to meet new friends and blend in with society without letting his past addiction define him.
You have this crazy history and this crazy past, and nobody knows about it.
Dave told us that staying clean for the rest of his life is not guaranteed. It's something he will have to work on. But you have now watched his journey.
Every day was the same, and every day was mapped out for me by my addiction, right, and by the disease. And like today, like I have the freedom and ability to do whatever I want.
And he hopes if there is anything you'll remember from the last hour, It's that there is hope in breaking addiction. Dave Heifel is proof of that.
We want to take a moment now to thank Dave for sharing his story with us. It's a scary thing to open yourself up the way he did, and it took a lot of strength. We want to remind you what allowed David to get his life back was the fact that he sought treatment. Addiction is a disease. As with any other disease, not getting the treatment you need can lead to suffering and even death. So we're going to end tonight with a phone number that you can call right now if you are struggling or if you know someone who is struggling with addiction. It's 1-800-662-HELP. Once again, it's 1-800-662-4357. We've also put information to access treatment on our website. And with that, we're going to end News 8's Chronicle on the heroin epidemic. Thank you for watching. Good night.